All right, so introduce yourself and let's get started.
All right. Well, good morning and welcome to our second Qualtrics webinar. My name is Heather Lansky, and as Kim said, I'm an admin for Qualtrics for the college. My other role is data quality reporting manager for the EHE Office of Research. The EHE college does have two other Qualtrics admins, Kevin Welsh and Scott Kaleli. They are with OIT, and their main role is to take care of all the user accounts. So privileges, if you forget your password, all those kinds of things should go through the service desk. My role with Qualtrics is assisting users with using Qualtrics and troubleshooting issues that you may have as you're using Qualtrics. So several of you don't have your microphones, so feel free to use the chat window and ask questions, and Kim will get those to me, and we can answer questions as we go along. This is very informal, so jump in whenever you like. If you happen to have dual screens and a Qualtrics account, I would encourage you to log into Qualtrics and follow along as we go. This is going to be a very basic kind of tour of Qualtrics. I'm not going to go into depth on any features. This is just a look-see at all the different menus, and Qualtrics underwent a pretty significant interface change last summer, and I've heard from several users that they're having a hard time navigating the new layout. So that's really the purpose of this, is to kind of walk through that new layout and see where everything is. So a quick note about our EHE Office of Research. We do several workshops every year, and they're all archived on the website link that you see on the screen. As Kim mentioned, we are recording today, so you can go back and view this again at your leisure or forward it to anyone else that you think might be interested in watching it. I've also uploaded the slide deck to the Files section of the presentation, so if you want to grab those and download them, you can. As I've said, this is really intended to kind of highlight specific features of Qualtrics. It's not meant to be a replacement for the training videos and the help that Qualtrics offers themselves. I'm available on a limited basis to help with complex questions, but the first point of contact should still be Qualtrics University and their help pages. I don't have the bandwidth to be an on-call support person. So how do you get started with Qualtrics? For EHE users, there's a link on your screen to our OIT folks, and you fill out that request for an account, and they will promise to get your account up within 2 business days. If you've put in a request for an account and you haven't heard from them within those 2 days, feel free to shoot me an email, and I can scoot that along a little bit. If you're on the call from outside the college, there's a link there for the OIT main Qualtrics request page, and you can hit that link and find out what you need to do to get a Qualtrics account. Once you have your account, the link to access it is osu.qualtrics.com. So we're going to jump right into our walkthrough now. Qualtrics has several menus and submenus. The main menu has 3 functions, which is projects, contacts, and library. Projects, also known as surveys, I don't know why they call it projects. I have a feeling that they're going to add something in at some later point that's not necessarily a survey, but right now it's all surveys. And that's where you access your surveys and create new surveys. The contact list stores any survey recipients, recipient list that you have. Library can store entire forms, single questions, blocks of questions. It's also where your messages go for your survey invitations, your survey reminders, end of survey messages. So we're going to walk through each one of these menus separately because some of them have submenus. So the projects menu is where you're going to create your surveys, distribute your surveys, analyze the data, and organize your surveys. So starting out with creating a survey, from the project tab, you click the button for create a new project, and that will take you to the design phase. As you go through Qualtrics, you will notice in several places there is this search projects or search bar. And that search bar changes based on what menu you're in, but it's always a search function. So you can put a keyword in there. It can help you find a survey. It can help you find a particular question on a survey. In the surveys library, it can help you locate things. So you can just throw some keywords in there. If you have a lot of surveys, that can be really helpful. Or if you're in a particular survey and you have a lot of questions in that survey and you need to find that question, it can help you navigate through that. Anywhere you see that search bar, you can search within that section only. Each search bar is limited to the menu that you are in at that moment. Turn my screen. Lost my mouse. There we go.
Heather, can
Uh-huh.
you hear me?
Yep.
All of a sudden, I could not hear you.
Okay.
I don't know if other people are in the same boat. The last couple things you might have said about your last slide, I did not hear.
Okay. So did you hear the part where I was talking about the search
Yes.
menu? Okay. So
Maybe
I
you,
think all I said after that was anywhere you see that search bar, you can search that section, but you can only search the particular tab that you're in. It doesn't search across all of Qualtrics. It's just
okay.
the tab that you're in at the moment.
Thanks for adding that again.
Sure. Okay, so when you're in the Create Project wizard, you give your survey a name. You can copy an existing survey, you can create it from one in your library, or create a brand new one. This from a file option, the important thing to note there is that has to be a Qualtrics file. So it has to be a Qualtrics form that's been exported and then sent to you. You can't just import from any file, which is unfortunate, but that's what it is. So that would be helpful if you were going to share forms with outside OSU, for example. This is also where your survey can be organized into a folder with the caveat that the folder already exists. So if you haven't created a folder, you can just save it to the default uncategorized folder and then move it to a folder later. So once you've named your project and assigned it to a folder, then you click Create Project. And the next thing you see is the survey design window. So this is where you can add new questions to your survey. The active question is highlighted in gray. Question types and object and options are on the right. And to create a new question, you can either click down here or you can click one of these plus signs. The advantage to the plus signs is that it allows you to control where that question goes. So this would go after this question, this would go before this question. If you do create a new question from here, it's going to be after by default. And so then you have this menu over here which gives you all of the choices that go along with the field type that you have chosen. So on your survey design page, you have a number of submenus. Look and feel, that controls your overall format, your color scheme, your font, and what I call a skin. Each college or unit that has Qualtrics has, in most cases, has a predetermined skin that the college has designed. Important to note about the EHE skin is we have discovered it's not mobile friendly. The folks at Advancement are working on a new skin, but that has not yet been finished. So when this presentation's over, I will upload a document that describes how to add that EHE logo into a plain skin. So you can still brand it with College of Education, but it just won't have all the fancy borders and whatnot that the actual EHE skin has. But they did discover that wasn't compatible with mobile, so at the moment, that's our choice. So then the next tab is survey flow, and that's a method of determining your question order, and it contains settings for randomization, authentication. There is a authentication feature where you can authenticate to the Shibboleth login. So if you're only surveying the OSU community, you can click that authentication and set it up so that it will only accept folks that have a name.number login. And the nice thing about doing that is when they authenticate that way, Qualtrics already automatically captures their first name, their last name, so you don't have to ask those additional questions if you authenticate with a Shibboleth login. So in the next Qualtrics Corner, which will be on April 3rd, we will go into survey flow in depth. Survey flow is a pretty complex section, and so I've divided it into two parts. So on April 3rd, we're going to do part one of that survey flow. And then survey options determines what options the participant has in using that particular survey. So that's going to be if they can use a back button or not, if they can save the survey and continue on another time, whether it's completely open access or they have to have an invitation to complete it. And this is also where you can specify your end of survey messages. So when they get to the end of the survey, you can customize what message they see, or you can redirect them to a URL. There's several options for what you can do at the end of the survey. The tools menu is probably one of the most important. There's several functions that are underneath the tools menu, probably the most important of which being test responses. There's also triggers there, and I will be covering triggers in a future webinar. Those are email triggers that you can set both to notify someone when a survey has been completed, but you can also set up triggers to send data from that survey to as embedded data to one of your contact lists. There's quite a variety of things that you can do with triggers, so I will be covering that separately in its own topic. Back to generate test responses real quick. You can specify how many test responses you want it to do, and the number of test responses that you give it will create the algorithm of how many different ways it tries to test. So if you have a lot of branch logic, I would suggest that you do maybe 25, 30, 50 responses so that it has a chance to go through and test all of the possible permutations of your logic. And then it's a good idea to look at the data from those test responses to make sure that everything looks the way that you would expect it to look. I can't stress testing and previewing enough, which brings me to the next little button on this page, which is Preview Survey. That gives you the preview of the look and functionality. It also allows you to test the survey yourself, walking through all the branching logic, so you can walk through the different scenarios that you expect and make sure that your branching logic, your survey flow, everything is working the way that you expect it to. The nice thing about Qualtrics is in that survey preview, it also shows you a mobile view, so you can see what the survey is going to look like on a mobile device. And the default mobile device is kind of generic, but it's more or less iPhone-ish. And that is what this looks like. So this is what the preview survey window looks like. So you're looking at the survey on the left and then the mobile view on the right. One important thing to note is I've got a matrix question type in here, and matrix questions have a specific box on the settings in the survey design window for mobile friendly. If you check that mobile friendly box, you'll see the result here that it kind of changes the layout of that matrix field so that it makes it mobile friendly. Otherwise, you're going to have to scroll far out to the right to see all the questions. Most cases, this probably isn't an issue, but if they need to see the entire matrix at one time, I would suggest maybe not using a matrix and maybe using individual questions in that case, just so they can see everyone in sequence. It really depends on what the nature of your question is. If you don't care at all about the mobile view, the yellow button up in the top right corner, that turns off that mobile view. So you can just turn that off and see the entire survey preview regardless of its mobile compatibility. So a second set of menus in that same design survey create project window. These are the menus that relate to survey distribution, looking at your data, and reporting. There's also an actions button there. That is still under development. I hope to cover that at a later time when the features are available. It shows a lot of promise. It looks to me like it's going to allow you to maybe trigger an app called Slack, and you could trigger a reminder to Slack. It looks like it's going to kind of interface with some different third-party apps. The one that they've got in beta right now connects to Salesforce, so you could trigger certain things on the survey to do certain functions in Salesforce. It looks to me like they're going to build that out. The other one that was really interesting to me was it looked like they had like a ticketing app, so that if you were using this for troubleshooting, if like for us, for Qualtrics, if you were using it to report issues or to request features, you could generate a ticket from that form. So it looks like it's going to be kind of neat. I'm anxious to see what all they build into that. The next tab over is distributions. This is where you send out your survey. You choose if you're going to send it out by email, if you're going to send it out by anonymous link. My previous Qualtrics, my first Qualtrics corner was all about using contact lists, and that was really all about distribution. So I recommend that you go back to our EHE webpage and check that out if you didn't attend on that one, because that really is the heart and soul of distributions. The next tab is data and analysis. That's where you look at the data that has been collected so far. I think analysis is maybe a stretch. There's not a whole lot of analysis that can go on there. There is some cross-tab functionality and some weighting functions, but I think it's a little bit of a misnomer. And analysis really needs to be done in Excel or SAS or SPSS or some other function, but I guess they just call it analysis for lack of a better word. I will be doing a data and analysis demonstration this fall. I think I've got it on the schedule for September, so look for that. The reporting tab has a big red X through it because I think it's inadequate for most uses, so I plan not to cover reports until I feel like it's useful enough to cover. It provides a few summary statistics, but for most uses, particularly in research, it's just not functional enough to be worth even talking about, unfortunately. So then, if you're working with multiple surveys in multiple projects, I think organization is a good thing. Qualtrics has designed it so that you can put your surveys into folders. So on the top left there's a button for folders, and that button toggles that folder window so it shows and hides. I just keep mine open all the time because I do a lot of dragging surveys around. So once you've got the survey window, you can just drag surveys into those various folders. There is a toggle view where you can decide which view of the survey list you want to see. So that's right here. This is your toggle view. So this is the first view that you get where it shows you the status, how many questions are on your survey, an approximate response time. Or if you choose the other view, then you get it more in this list format. That again, it shows you the status, but it also shows you when it was last modified, when it was created, how many responses you have. And this actions button. The actions button is here too. It's just hidden behind this other menu. You can sort your list of surveys in a variety of different ways. You can sort them by project name, by project type. And I guess project type at this point is just whether it's active or not. You can star your surveys. There's a little star there. You can star those to mean whatever it means to you. And you can sort them by their starred status. You can sort them by their status of whether they are, that must be the same as project type. I'm not clear on what that means. You can sort them last modified date, when they were created, how many responses they have, who owns them, and any group ownership. I'm not really going to talk much about group ownership and ownership status because it's a little bit different. Each department, each college handles group functionality a little bit differently. So it's hard for me to talk about it in this broad kind of setting. But if you have questions about groups, just shoot me an email and I can help guide you. But given that we have several people on the call that are outside of EHE, I don't want to give misinformation about how groups are administered for somebody else's division. Yeah.
Heather, this is Kim. You have about 10 minutes, so
okay.
I just wanted to have you keep track of the time.
Sure. I appreciate that. I think I'm I'm on schedule for that, but we will see. So again, this is your search menu. You can search across all your projects or within a specific folder. So if you're in one of those folders, as I said before, the search menu is dependent on which function you're in, which tab you're in, which folder you're in. So walking through the context menu, again, this is where I had done using a context list webinar that we did in February. So there's a link to that on the screen if you weren't able to attend that. It really walks through everything you need to know about using a contact list. So that's all I'm going to say about contacts for now. The library menu, as I said earlier, this is where you can create a library of surveys. You can create a library of graphics, files, and your survey messages. So your survey library, this is where you can put entire surveys, question blocks, individual questions, really helpful for reusing surveys. So if you have the same demographics survey that you use over and over, this is a good place to put that, and then you can just keep reusing it. Also, if you have maybe a block of questions where you've got a really complex logic that you might want to use again, or you just don't want to have to ever create it ever again because it was horrible, you can store it there and reuse it again. To save a survey or a question or a block to your library, you click this copy to library box and it will pull up a list of surveys or questions or whatever it is you want to save. You can also get there from the survey design page or from the main projects page. They both have little drop downs where you can say copy this to your library, and that will send it to your library. So the graphics library is kind of the same format. You can store JPEGs here. You can store really pretty much any graphics type that you have. This is where if you're going to use the EHE logo on a plain format to replace that skin that doesn't work, you have to save that logo here first before you can access it in the look and feel menu and put it into your survey. So there's not a whole lot to say about graphics library. If you're putting a lot of graphics in your surveys, you have to put them here before you can use them anywhere else in Qualtrics. The same way, the files library, you can put in PDFs, Word docs, video clips, audio clips, and then you can embed those in your surveys and your email messages. This is really the only way to attach something to an email that you're sending within Qualtrics. So if you're inviting participants to take out your survey and you want to attach a PDF, this is the only way to do it. You store it here in this library and then call it, link to it from your email message that you've created. Virtually anything that you need to use within Qualtrics that came from outside, if it's a PDF or a graphic, has to be stored in the library before you can access it. And lastly, the messages library. As I said before, this is where you put your survey invitations, your survey reminders, thank you messages, end of survey messages. If you've taken a survey down and it's inactive, you can set a message there that explains, come back in 6 months or whatever it is for your inactive survey. It's also where you can put validation messages. So if you have built custom validation in your question, you can write a custom validation message here. So this would be like if you have an email field and you want to tell them you have to enter a valid email address that has to be .osu.edu or whatever validation that you've built that may be a little bit outside the box. You can create a custom validation message for that here. So virtually anything that you're going to say to the participants about a survey, the messages go here. This is also a good way to reuse standard messages. So if you use the same invitation language over and over, you store it here and then you just use it. You can use any of these messages, you can use them on multiple surveys. When you're building your email message, you indicate what message you want to go with it, and it's not tied to a specific survey. It's its own library. So that's a caution. If you're gonna use that same one over, maybe you're tweaking the language just a little bit. Make sure you're pulling the right survey message for the right survey. I always tag mine with the survey that I've written it for. Even if the language is just a little bit different, I save it as a new message and put some kind of keyword tag on it so that I know that survey goes with that message. And I think that's, and all you do to create that new message is just click that new message box and it will ask you, is it a reminder, is it a thank you? And it'll throw it in that, in the appropriate box for it, and it will save it there. And that's all I've got. I encourage you to create a practice survey and explore all these different menus and tools. You really can't break anything, so there's nothing to be lost by just creating, my survey test and just going in and play with it and see what the different functions do. If you get stuck, reach out to me. I think we have maybe a minute or two for questions. So if you have anything that you want to see again, I can flip back. Otherwise, thank you all for coming.
Hey, Heather, this is Kim. Would you do me a favor while people are maybe typing in a question? Would you go back to your slides and grab the link to the video from your first Qualtrics?
Sure.
Grab that, because I can't actually grab it off of your slides. If you would, grab that. Yep,
I just passed it. Yep.
yeah, I thought you did. So if you can grab that URL and put it in this notes field.
Okay. Yep, I can do that. I also have that other thing I need to upload too.
Okay. Well, I've been putting a couple things in the notes, and Kristen, Nikki, Heather, Caroline, Rachel, would you tell me if you can see that notes pod? Just type in. Yes. Okay, great. Are the links active, or
They are active.
Can you type? I'm learning here also. So can you type into that notes field, or is that just what hosts can do?
So.
Okay, good. Well, do any of you gals, oh, okay, so this, the link that she just put in is the video, the recording from her first Qualtrics webinar, and we'll have that up on that archive page soon, but right now it's not. So let me go ahead and put this link in. It's the recording from the first Qualtrics webinar. And Heather, you really were looking at contacts, or?
Yes, using a contacts list, but I also talk a little bit more about distribution.
Okay.
But the main part of distribution is using a contact list, so I think that should cover the distribution tab fairly well.
Okay.
And I've also now uploaded that PDF that talks about how to put the EHE logo into a generic Qualtrics theme. So that is available there to download as well.
Yeah. And so our participants, what you can do is actually click on one of those files, and then it should say either upload or download, depending on what kind of a file it is. And if you're having any trouble having that work, please send an email to Heather or myself. And Heather, yep. You will follow up with everybody that's registered, and you will also send them some more information. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, including the recording for this presentation.
Right. I'll probably do both recordings and the attachments just in case folks weren't able to download them.
Great idea. So ladies, any questions? Doesn't look like anything's coming through. All right, well, thank you so much for coming. I did want you to save the date, the next Qualtrics webinar, date and time and topic. It'll be focused on survey flow, and Heather seems to think that might take more than one session. So we'll hit survey flow part 1, and that's April 3rd from 11:30 to noon. And especially since you registered for this, when that registration is ready, Heather will make sure that you get that as well. So have a wonderful day, and hope to see you next month.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.